The Lockridge family's annual winter gala had always been a spectacle, but this year it was different. The sprawling estate on the cliffs of Newport had been transformed into a glittering palace for the night. Golden chandeliers dripped light across the marble floors, every corner humming with the soft clink of champagne flutes and the low murmur of 100 conversations. This was not just a gathering, it was a carefully curated display of wealth, status, and connections. In a room like this, every smile was calculated, every laugh measured. The guests were dressed like a living magazine spread, tailored suits that cost as much as cars, gowns that shimmered with imported crystals, and jewelry that seemed to have its own gravity. Outside, the Atlantic crashed against the rocks below, a distant reminder that the world beyond this ballroom was not always so polished. And then there was the piano. It sat at the far end of the room, away from the center of attention, a baby grand with a faded black finish, its ivory keys yellowed with time. Some guests assumed it had been brought in as a piece of decoration, something to suggest refinement. Others thought it might be a relic from the Lockridge family's early days, kept for sentimental reasons. Nobody seemed to think it was meant to be played. Among the crowd was Seraphina Lockridge, the host of the evening and heiress to a century-old shipping empire. She was 31, elegant to the point of intimidation, and possessed the kind of poise that made people straighten their posture when she entered a room. Her beauty was the sort you didn't question, it simply commanded attention. But beneath that poise was a streak of boredom that often led her to make daring remarks just to see what would happen. By 10 o'clock, she had grown tired of polite conversation and predictable compliments. Standing with a glass of rose, she gestured toward the old piano with a knowing smirk. "I'll tell you what," she announced to her circle of friends, her voice carrying just far enough to be overheard by half the room. "If anyone here can flawlessly play that thing, I'll marry them on the spot." The room reacted instantly, laughter, teasing comments, a few mock offers to play. Men puffed their chests for a moment before retreating into the safety of their wine glasses. Nobody took the challenge seriously. It was a game, a social jab meant to amuse the elite. In the far corner, away from the golden light, Elijah Carter emptied a small trash bin into a rolling cart. At 29, Elijah was the estate's night janitor, invisible in the way that people in expensive clothes often choose not to see. His uniform was clean but plain, and his quiet demeanor made it easy for guests to look past him entirely. But behind his calm eyes lay a lifetime of music: Sunday afternoons in his grandmother's living room, late nights practicing on a second-hand keyboard, the kind of playing that wasn't learned in conservatories but lived in the bones. He heard the challenge, he heard the laughter, and he felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the one that came when people assumed they already knew what he was capable of. For a moment, he thought about letting it pass. Then he thought about his grandmother, how she used to tell him, "Don't hide the light God gave you, Eli. Not for anyone." He set down the trash cart and began walking toward the piano. The shift in the room was subtle at first, just a few raised eyebrows, a couple of confused glances. Then whispers started. "Is the janitor? What's he doing?" Seraphine's eyes followed him with curiosity edged in disbelief. "You?" she said, half smiling as he approached. "You want to try?" Elijah didn't answer. He just pulled out the bench and sat down. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, feeling the resistance of the worn ivory, the slight unevenness of the action. This piano had stories. It had been played by hands long gone, and yet it had been left to sit, gathering dust in a corner where beauty was decoration, not expression. Then, without fanfare, Elijah began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, and then the music bloomed, full, rich, and heartbreakingly alive. It was Chopin, yes, but with something more: his own inflections, small improvisations that gave the piece a pulse all its own. The notes rose and swirled like smoke, pulling every ear toward them. Conversations faltered, laughter died away. The servers froze mid-step, trays balanced in their hands. It was as though the room itself had forgotten how to breathe. Elijah's eyes were closed now, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. He wasn't performing for them, he was speaking to the instrument, coaxing out everything it had been holding inside. The melody was both fragile and powerful, carrying the weight of joy and sorrow in equal measure. Seraphine's smirk had vanished. She was standing perfectly still, her glass untouched, watching the man in the janitor's uniform transform the neglected piano into something transcendent. Around her, guests exchanged glances, some in awe, some in quiet embarrassment for having laughed moments earlier. When the final chord faded into silence, the room remained frozen for a beat. Then, like a dam breaking, applause erupted loud. Genuine, unrestrained, some guests stood. Others shouted, "Bravo!" over the noise. Elijah simply rose from the bench, nodded once, and turned to leave. Wait. Seraphine's voice cut through the clapping. She took a few steps toward him. "Where did you learn to play like that?" He paused, his expression calm but unreadable. "My grandmother taught me the first notes. Life taught me the rest." The word settled over the crowd like a soft weight. A few people looked down, suddenly aware of how quickly they had dismissed him before he even touched the keys. The marriage challenge, once a joke, now felt like a strange, lingering echo. Seraphina didn't repeat it. Instead, she said quietly, "I think we misjudged you, Mr. Carter." Elijah offered a faint smile. "Most people do." The video of that night appeared online before the guests had even left the estate. Filmed. On a phone, slightly shaky, it showed Elijah in his work uniform, head bowed, fingers moving like lightning across the worn keys. By morning, it had been shared thousands of times. By nightfall, it had millions of views. Comment sections lit up with praise, outrage, and reflection. People debated why talent so often went unnoticed until it was wrapped in a package society found acceptable within days. Elijah was contacted by news stations, music schools, even a few major concert promoters. But he declined most offers. The one he accepted was for a small community concert in his old neighborhood, raising funds to provide instruments and lessons for kids who couldn't afford them. When asked why, he told a local reporter, "Because talent dies when it's ignored. I want to make sure the next kid doesn't have to wait for a rich stranger's dare to be seen." Seraphina Lockridge attended that concert unannounced, sitting in the back row. She didn't speak to him afterward, but those who saw her said her eyes were fixed on the stage the entire time. Her expression unreadable. Back at the estate, the piano was no longer ignored. From time to time, Elijah would find himself alone in the ballroom after his shift, sitting at the bench, letting the notes drift into the quiet. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about honoring the gift, and the woman who first put his hands on the keys. And though the guests who had been there still talked about the night the janitor played, the truth was simpler. It wasn't about who he was or what he wore. It was about the music and how, for a few minutes, it reminded everyone in that room what beauty really was.